Bangkok. Along with him, we have Dr. Paresh Kharel, Research Director, Swati, and we have three wonderful paper presenters, for, Dr. Yagama Reddy, Dr. Swati Zain, and Ms. Swati Verma, who are from Center for Southeast Asian and Pacific Studies, Sri Venkateshwara University, India, and Symbiosis International University, India, respectively. I'd like to first welcome you all, and I'd like to mention a few housekeeping. So, all the paper presenters and the panelists, keep your microphone muted except the time of paper presentation. So the video should be on. You are kindly requested to keep your video on. You will have exactly 10 minutes for your paper presentation session, and you will be reminded at 8th minute that you have 2 minutes left. So your paper presentation, the presentation should contain 5 to 8 slides. The chat box will be used for comments and questions, and they will be read out by the chair, or the chair will allow people to ask the questions. Before asking question, everyone please remember to use your respective designation and name. And please be very brief, since we have already started 10 minutes left. Over to you, Honorable Chair, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last session of the dialogue, which is regional cooperation. I know this is the end of the day and last session, but it is a very important session. First of all, let me thank Sanem and Professor Salim Rehan for inviting me to this very timely and important meeting on regional cooperation in the wake of COVID-19 crisis, along with economic crisis. Now, what we want to discuss in this session is to basically look at how regional cooperation can help resolving the problem that we are currently having with regard to COVID-19 crisis. As we all know, Asia Pacific region has a long history in regional cooperation. Starting from 1950s, when UNSCAP took leadership in setting up various regional cooperation initiatives, such as Asian Highway, Trans-Asian Railway in 1950s, and then Bangkok Agreement, or later it was called APTA Agreement, Asian Clearing Union, Mekong River Commission, and there are many other things. And finally, ESCAP member countries also were able to set up a Asian Development Bank, which itself became a regional cooperation organization. So that ADB is adding a lot of value to regional cooperation in Asia Pacific region. Now, in this session, we have 3 papers plus discussion looking at various aspects of regional cooperation. And what we want to see is that, in fact, our region has many regional cooperation organizations, like later on, like ASEAN and SAARC and BIMSTEC and many other corporate mechanisms came. And also, for example, in the area of trade, there are over 65 FTAs with a regional agreement as well as bilateral agreement. My observation, looking at all these many regional cooperation initiatives, is that the region is yet to benefit from the gains from regional cooperation due to various reasons. But when it comes to Bay of Bengal, in fact, it is whatever the cooperation arrangement we have are limited, except perhaps, of course, BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC has a wide coverage of regional cooperation in, I think, 14 areas. So that is a good umbrella organization connecting South Asia as well as Southeast Asia. Now, without further ado, maybe I will come to these three papers and invite one by one to make presentation. As already I saw that time has been set because we are running a little bit of late, and then followed by a discussion. Now, our first presenter is Dr. Yagama Reddy, Professor, Center for Southeast Asian and Pacific Studies, Sri Venkateswara, University of India. And he's going to talk about Bay of Bengal Forum to accomplish regional cooperation. Dr. Reddy, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, Dr. Ravi Ratnayake. At the outset, I am extremely thankful to the organizers of this dialogue, Salim, especially to Salim and Ambassador Sumit Nakandala.
I think you are looking for a PowerPoint presentation. Okay.
Yes. Kindly bear with me.
No problem.
Some problem.
Dr. Reddy, you want to start the introduction while you are setting it up?
Could you find my PowerPoint presentation?
Of course, we can see it.
We can see your presentation. Do you want to put it in the PowerPoint presentation mode?
Yes, please.
Okay, so you can see that there are three icons in the bottom line, not here. Okay, so from the first slide, if you click on the first slide, please. Click on the first slide, yeah?
Yes.
Just click on that. Yeah. Okay, so you can
right, sir. Thank you.
Okay, please go ahead.
At the outset, let me draw the attention of the participants. The regional cooperation which we have been talking about for so long a time is a ubiquitous pursuit. It does not end by itself. It approaches the next phase, regional cooperation, which facilitates the process towards the regional integration. Unless and otherwise, the countries in a region are integrated, there would be no purpose served and there would be no prospects of cooperation, and hence there would be no integration. Therefore, regional integration assumes the form of an association of states based on the location in a given geographical area. Discussion on regional cooperation has thus become the order of the day. As a corollary, differential approaches, a degree of homogeneity forms the common denominator in all aspects. These states which we are talking much about it, and I would like to draw the attention of the participants. There is semblance in the physical setting of the Bay of Bengal region, which is at the base of the cooperation that is expected of. The most strategic is South China Sea with the Indian Ocean proper, 7 littoral states, what is more important, they have broad correspondence in the physical setting, a set of commonalities as well as complementarities that form the debate for the prospects of regional cooperation. Unless and otherwise, there are such commonalities and there are such complementary features, nothing can be thought of the regional cooperation or the regional integration. What is more important, the coastline or area ratios that would evaluate the degree of accessibility. Let me not go into the details. What I would like to draw the attention of this session, that each of the littoral states, save or except Nepal and Bhutan, all other the littoral states of Bay of Bengal, they have a long coastline for developing more and more coastal trading stations. And while talking about this aspect, let us also take into account the human geography that is at the base of the Bay of Bengal region, which is to be considered as a regional entity. It is not fleeted in terms of geographical proximity or geometrical location. In fact, there are certain historical developments that have led to the complementarities which are predisposed to geography. As you know very well, monsoon rhythm that has a tremendous historical significance of human geography. There is climatic correspondence in the Bay of Bengal region from Himalayas down to the Indian Ocean. They have led to the evolution of unique eco-subsystem and composite culture providing common basis. This region is inhabited by 1.4 billion people along its coastline and thus becomes a home for almost 1/4 of the world population. And it is a region that is having distinction of having carried out 1/4 of the world's trade in goods. There are complementary features which we need to take into account, for which we need to find certain coincidental regional variations. Regional variations in terms of human development index, life expectancy, gross national index per capita, and the next one which I would like to draw, the gross domestic product is very much varied among the states of Bay of Bengal region. Furthermore, the share of the agriculture sector, industry sector, service sector in the GDP is also very much varied. Because of this kind of variation among the countries of Bay of Bengal region, there is possibility for some degree of regional cooperation. But all said and done, Bay of Bengal region has for the last few years been suffering from lack of trade complementarity. The trade is so minuscule and it has been declining trend in the intra-regional trade. Actual Indian exports to imports and actual export, potential export, this would clearly indicate from the table, as we could glean from the table, they are at its minimum level. There is much gap between the actual export and import, and hence the region is suffering from lackluster trading pattern. The another table that is for the 15 years, each of these region have intra-regional or trade intensity index very minuscule except Bhutan and Nepal. And the lackluster trading pattern is to be further understood. No country in this region as major export destination or major import source. Over 3/5 or 60% of the Indian exports in 2017 were delivered to 15 trading partners, and of them Bangladesh, Nepal figured with insignificant status. Furthermore, what is the gloomy situation? India's top exports accounted for 60% of the overall value of its global shipments. Similarly, India's top imports accounted for 4/5 or 78% of the overall value of its product purchased from the other countries. Thus, Bay of Bengal region enduring lackluster trading pattern. It is because of the
Dear paper presenter, you have
Yes, please. Or commodity competitiveness. Except India, Thailand Free Trade Agreement, Bay
Presenter,
of Bengal littorals need for establishing free trade agreements and setting up RETA. As I have explained earlier, major export destinations of India is with respect to several other countries except Bangladesh in the case of Bay of Bengal region. Of course, we can again and again talk about the poor connectivity among the Bay of Bengal region countries. Yes, it is the least integrated region, poor state of connectivity, poor state of integration, and hence poor cooperation that is inhibiting the free movement of goods and people, but deep-rooted suspicions and differences are there. Intrastate conflicts, intrastate crises, they restrain to achieve the adequate degree of complementarity of interests and regional economic cooperation. Furthermore, trust deficit inhibits the spirit of regional cooperation. India's geographical size, demographic and economic potential, and political weight is the major problem. Smaller states view India as both savior and as a part of the problem and are reluctant to work with India.
Professor
There
Reddy,
are,
you should wrap it up because your time is over.
let me conclude. We have inherent resource potentialities which need to be harnessed, and there are prospects and potentials for cooperation, and India needs to pay attention. And there is possibility if we can look into the physical setting, agriculture systems, farming typology, better understanding of the prospects and potentials of the cooperation. And at the same time, the extra-regional powers are also very much interested in this region. Therefore, these centrifugal activities would accomplish the process of establishing a new family in a new get-together that would lead to simply strengthening the concept of extended neighborhood in this Bay of Bengal region. Therefore, my submission to these learned scholars, unless and otherwise the basic intrinsic realities are taken into account and the complementary features are harnessed, and in fact, the commonalities would again provide an opportunity for the Bay of Bengal region countries to think more about the other countries, and they have better understanding of each other in promoting the cooperation, and that would lead to the next stage of regional integration. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy, for your interesting presentation. Of course, you took 1 or 2 minutes more because you had a digital problem, so that's fine. Of course, you were trying to explain, in a way, a dilemma the region is facing. You know, one of the two, in fact, two of the many determinants of international trade is, one is market size, and which Bay of Bengal has 1.4 billion people, huge market. And then secondly, also a lot of natural resources. But still, you were trying to explain lackluster trade performance due to various reasons, and number of reasons you have presented. I think one is, in fact, lack of complementarity, and as well as connectivity. And also you mentioned about role of India being in the center, especially in South Asia, and connecting with the sub-regional countries is a key determinant of enhancing intra-regional trade. Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. Now I'm going to invite my second presenter, Dr. Swati Jain, and the topic is strategic public investment in agriculture for sustainable development in South Asia. Dr. Jain, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, sir. Respected Chair, Dr. Ratnaike, respected Dr. Rehan, sir, and all the participants and all the dignitaries present in attending the conference. I really find myself privileged to get this opportunity to present a brief research paper and share my observations with you at this distinguished forum, Bay of Bengal conference, and particularly in the context of COVID. So I'm really thankful to all the organizers and all the learned people there to give me a chance. Now, my paper is entitled Strategic Public Investment in the Agricultural Sector in the context of sustainable development. And the idea here is that why agriculture sector has to be a priority. When we for a long time we are discussing about COVID and crisis related to COVID, there are several dimensions to it. But when we are talking about this crisis, one important fact to which we all agree is the COVID crisis questions the very basis of the development policies and the sustainability of the ongoing economic development framework, where we have different ideologies, but the underlying fact is promote private investment and generate more returns so that the growth can move faster. So high growth, high investment, but through the private sector. So agriculture sector is observing a structural transformation as most of the countries have gone through this process. My paper focuses on South Asia, particularly Asian economies, and South Asia is also undergoing this structural transformation. But in the context of COVID, this agricultural sector has become important because the recent reports by World Bank, ADB, or Food and Agricultural Organization, most of the top institutions, what they are saying, according to the United Nations World Food Program, the recent report which has come out, approximately 265 million people will be now food insecure. So that means again the major burden of handling this insecurity, food insecurity, will be on the agricultural sector as a provider also, and as a provider of food grains, and at the same time provider of employment also. So according to a recent report by World Bank, and particularly the report which is on South Asia, which is termed as beaten or broken. So that is a very interesting report to go through. And what it says is that there is an increase from 135 million people before the crisis in terms of agriculture. So in the agricultural sector, the burden of 135 million people have increased. So now this raises the question of importance of the agricultural sector. And the most affected regions in South Asia have been proposed as Bangladesh and Afghanistan in terms of nutritional insecurity also, and in terms of severe poverty indicators also. So in that way, I'm talking about this agricultural sector, and there are several papers also which have come up with the idea, and the main crux of the paper is that agricultural sector has appeared as a shock absorber during this COVID crisis due to several reasons. So now what we observe that in Asia, overall Asia and particularly South Asia, 21 to 40% of the population is still dependent on agriculture, and the dependence has increased even more. In terms of formal dependence and in terms of informal dependence, both it is going up. And if we take the case of India, like earlier, that 140 million people till 2019 were dependent on agriculture. Now, particularly during the COVID crisis, it has gone up to 158 million. So there are studies which says that agriculture sector's buffering capacity in terms of providing employment, in terms of providing excess food grains, or whatever is required from the agricultural sector, is constrained if supply chains are not functioning properly. And we are very well aware of the fact that supply chain has got affected. Although prices have not fluctuated a lot in the agricultural sector, but supply chain has really got affected with it. So the idea of this paper is to propose that public investment plays a crucial role here. Now, if you see through this graph, this is again taken from the Beaten or Broken report. What it says is that due to the COVID, most of the countries which are affected is in the industrial sector or the service sector. So agricultural sector has again appeared as a shock absorber. Now there are more things to discuss from this graph, but due to the short time, I'm not focusing much on that. I just wanted to share this graph with you. So now if we talk about the agricultural sector, if the burden of job losses is to be borne by the agricultural sector, that not only cost of production will go up, but at the same time, per capita surplus and labor productivity will also come down. And there are estimates which shows that there will be a 2 to 3% decline in potential output, and there will be decline in productivity also. In the reports itself, it has been said, and particularly in South Asian countries, there will be a drastic fall in agricultural productivity, in terms of labor also, and in terms of total productivity also. So again, I'm drawing your attention to the status between, because one of the major important objective of this paper is to understand and compare the situation of government expenditure and public investment in agriculture in this area. So in this region. So now this graph shows you the government expenditure share in terms of their total budgeted expenditure. And you will, if you will see minutely, then you will find most of the South Asian countries reflecting here. So they are spending approximately more than 5% of their budget on agriculture. Now, but when you see this graph, this is gross fixed capital formation in the agricultural
presenter,
sector.
you have 2 minutes left.
Yes, yes. So although government expenditure is high in the South Asian countries, but gross fixed capital formation, that is the retained investment in this sector, is actually declining. And this graph is again trying to show you that what is the percentage of investment, public investment in the agricultural sector. Now, on the basis of this public investment, this is an important indicator for the sustainable development indicators. And in that terms, agricultural orientation index is developed for all the countries. Now, this graph shows that all these countries which have a major stake in the agricultural sector in terms of value addition, in terms of employment, but their investment in the public investment in the agricultural sector is declining. So I tried to make some estimations regarding what will be the impact of public investment in terms of affecting the agricultural sector growth and in terms of crowding in private investment. Because over the time period, we have been proposing that agriculture has to move from the self-sufficiency mode to commercialized agriculture, to diversified agriculture, and therefore investment has to go up, but government, given its small fiscal space or stress on various committed expenditure, has been declining the public investment and giving room for private investment as well as FDI. Most of the South Asian countries also have given permission for FDI. So what is actually happening? So now this model estimations, which I'm trying to show here, is not complete. Still doing it because there are a lot many issues in terms of comparable data. I'm not getting the data most of the time for many of the countries. After 2009, I'm not getting a comparable data situation, but the limited data which I had. So what I'm trying to find out here is a positive relationship between public investment and growth, a positive relationship between bank credit to agriculture and agricultural growth, but a very non-significant type of impact of FDI. So why, although public expenditure is there, but why I say that public expenditure is insufficient and has to go up on the basis of the paper, the investment share is very low if we compare in terms of most of the Western countries or the developed countries. Even if we compare the whole Asia, South Asia, public investment share is very low. So the positive relationship which comes out through the model maybe will be extended or maybe will become more significant if the ratio of public investment goes up, which will help in increasing the private investment as well as FDI, which will affect these South Asian
Again,
countries
please
more.
conclude.
Okay, so I'm concluding. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Jain, for very interesting presentation. You were pointing out that the importance of agriculture for the region, especially our focus today is the Bay of Bengal, and also lack of public investment in that sector. I fully agree, and we all can remember Green Revolution some time ago, like 1960s, 70s, where we consider as a golden age of agriculture, but then we shifted. The world, especially European countries, shifted from agriculture to manufacturing and then neglected in a way. But now, I think recently I think countries have recognized the importance of agriculture for livelihood, employment, food security, and so forth. For all, it is in a way, it is a breadwinner for the region. Especially developing countries, given this food security problem. So thank you once again, Dr. Jain, for your interesting presentation. Now, let me invite my third presenter, Ms. Swati Verma, and she's going to talk about trends and the way forward for COVID-19 in food security by BIMSTEC nations. Ms. Verma, floor is yours.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Good evening to all the participants, esteemed chair, esteemed discussant, and my fellow paper presenters. My name is Swati Verma. I am a student, final year post-graduation student at Symbiosis School of Economics, Symbiosis International University, India. And I will be presenting the paper on trends and the way forward post-COVID-19 in food security by the BIMSTEC nation. The other contributor to my paper is Aratrika Dev, who is also from the same university. So, the sudden outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic had put a very deep impact on the world's population with respect to lives and livelihood in poverty. The pandemic brought almost every economy to a grinding halt, and has led to a sharp increase in unemployment and inflation, and thus pushed the poor people at the brink of serious food insecurity. The BIMSTEC nation had already have several food security measures even before the pandemic had set in. However, BIMSTEC region being a low and middle income region is also dependent on food imports. But such imports have to be cut short due to the rise in protectionist policies and disruption in cross-border infrastructure, uh, and logistics. Moving on to the introduction of our paper, the inclusion of food security as a sustainable development goal of zero hunger is a remarkable step taken to tackle the problem of malnutrition and hunger. Various nations are already working at domestic as well as international level to tackle this issue. BIMSTEC nations have also committed to tackle the problem of malnutrition and hunger by the year 2030. Even Bangladesh and Thailand have successfully implemented various poverty elevation measures, which are recognized globally. However, the stark income inequalities due to agrarian-based economies is there in the economies. To tackle the problem, to tackle the food insecurity rise due to the ongoing COVID pandemic, various government grants and policies are taken up by the BIMSTEC nation in addition to the already existing policies. However, it is to be noticed that the current problem of rise in food insecurity is raised from the cross-border logistic trade deficit, trade movements, and transport. Most of the nation in BIMSTEC region have pushed through the lockdowns because of the buffer food stocks that they have. However, if the problem is not addressed, if the problem is not addressed, the many nations will face severe food insecurity. Coming to the literature review, we have studied various literatures which have analyzed food security policy in the BIMSTEC region. However, there are only policies on the individual measures for BIMSTEC nations, such as Manan for Bangladesh, Choil Gimre for Bhutan, Agarwal for India, Dahal for Nepal, MIID report for Myanmar, Hetirachi and Liange for Thailand, and Kosulwat for Sri Lanka. In the ORF paper by Shobha and Tyagi, they have concluded that even before the pandemic was hit, the BIMSTEC nation were not on the track to achieve the goal of zero hunger by the year 2030. The same results were concluded by the World Food Report 2020 that the world is not on the track to attain the zero hunger goal. Uh, we found very few studies on regional cooperation in agriculture by the BIMSTEC nations. Moving along, the objective and the research question posed by this paper is, the objective of the paper is to assess the regional agricultural trade data between India and BIMSTEC and how India can contribute to de-stress the BIMSTEC economies from the challenges of food security. Furthermore, our study will work upon policy recommendation which will favor long and sustainable solution to tackle the problem of food insecurity in the BIMSTEC nations. The research question posed by our paper is, first, what is India's possible contribution to the BIMSTEC nation to alleviate food insecurity situation? And second, can India provide sustainable and long-term solutions to tackle this problem? The methodology of our paper is as follows. We have used secondary sources of data for the period 1978 to 2019. We have used a projective research from which insights were obtained through a gravity model approach. The data was taken from various reliable and credible sources such as Reserve Bank of India, World Investment Report, Department of Commerce.
Well, presenter, you have 2 minutes left.
Yes. Department of Industry and Internal Trade by Government of India. This is the final gravity model used in our paper. For the independent variable is food imports from India to BIMSTEC nations, which is dependent on GDP of importing country, GDP of India, distance between capital city of India and capital city of importing country, and the dummy variable to show the presence of of free trade agreement. However, we have initially used trade openness and exchange rates in our model, but however they were not they included high variance and therefore have to be removed. The results of our model is we have used a fixed effects model for a panel regression using a Hausman test. All the variables such as GDP of importing country, GDP of India, and the presence of FT are significant in a model and had a positive coefficients. The adjusted R-square after checking for heteroscedasticity and autocorrelation was 72%, and we have concluded the model as a good fit. However, long run and short run causality will help identify the variables that needs to be focused upon for the future decision. These are some of the policy recommendations that our paper suggested. First is utilization of full potential of existing trade agreements. Second, as our paper suggested, if the number of FTA between the trading countries increases, it will help in food imports, which will thus tackle the food insecurity in the region. Also, increase in food availability and food access are one of the necessary conditions to tackle the problem of food insecurity in any region. Development of infrastructure, rural infrastructure such as transport infrastructure, irrigation infrastructure, and efficient market infrastructure is required. And lastly, strengthening of trade between countries is required to tackle the problem of food insecurity together. Uh, and hence, I will conclude my paper. As the study concludes that
Dear
agriculture
presenter, your
trade
time is
between
up.
yes, I just need 30 seconds.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Yes. This study concludes that agriculture trade between India and BIMSTEC nations have increased in the last 2 decades. Our study used a gravity model approach to suggest that agricultural trade imports from BIMSTEC nation from India is highly dependent on the economy size of the importing country and the presence of FTA with the country. Furthermore, our study has suggested various policy recommendations to tackle the challenges of food security in BIMSTEC nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Varma, for your very interesting presentation. I think I tend to agree with your conclusion in a way that you are, of course, you are trying to say that the role of India in food security, and then you found, of course, FTAs is one of the major determinant in that. Well, yes, in a way, we have around India, there are with the South Asian countries, India has number of agreements. Not only, I'm not referring to FTAs. Of course, it has FTAs with some countries like Sri Lanka, but also India has many other agreements, treaties, border agreement. But still, with all these things, for some reason, food security is a big problem for South Asia. Especially, there are countries like Bangladesh, maybe depending on imports, and food security problems are there. So yes, I think your conclusion basically in a way that strengthening existing agreements, whatever it could be, FTAs or others, but we need to strengthen them, make them more effective so that the countries can benefit from them. Thank you so much, Ms. Verma, for your interesting presentation. Now let me go to the discussion. We have Dr. Paras Karel, Research Director, South Asia Watch on Trade, Swati, Nepal. So, Dr. Karel, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Hope I'm audible. So thank you, Sanem, for organizing this particular session. So there are 3 papers. 2 in a way take quantitative approach. The third takes a more qualitative approach, dwelling also on political and geopolitical dimensions. So I will discuss in reverse order, beginning with the 2 quantitative papers. The first is by Ms. Swati Verma, she basically talks about the determinants of imports of food products and agricultural products from India into BIMSTEC. Now, in the background section, what could be done, this is a suggestion, is that discuss a bit on the heterogeneity in food security among BIMSTEC nations, because they are a heterogeneous lot. And then now your 2 questions: what is India's possible contribution to alleviating food insecurity in BIMSTEC, and can India provide solutions to this? And you use a gravity model, and when you do that, why do you exactly do that? I guess to assess the determinants of imports from India into BIMSTEC countries. So first, in your paper, you might want to give some descriptive statistics on the rest of BIMSTEC's dependence on India for food products and agriculture products, give a flavor of what's going on. And even before that, you might want to give some trends and patterns of trade between these countries. And also talk about existing BTAs between India and other BIMSTEC countries and their utilization, as well as SAFTA itself. And then also clarify when you talk about agriculture imports, is it basically chapters 1 to 24 in the HS code? And you can also look at segments within. So your main research question could be the determinants of BIMSTEC imports of food agriculture products from India, or conversely, determinants of India's exports of food agriculture products to BIMSTEC. Where now that would be more, I think, precise because India's possible contribution to alleviating food security in BIMSTEC would be pretty broad. Now on panel data, you have used panel data, as you said, but the equation as you have presented is cross-sectional, but I guess that's just a, typological issue. But with regard to other standard geodesic variables in the gravity model, like, common border, not common colonizer and those standard stuffs, perhaps you should use them. And then on FTA, does it, of course, I think it includes ASEAN membership and SAFTA membership also there. And what about APTA? Does it include that or not? And then since you use panel data with fixed effects, is there enough variation in the data? Have you checked it? And if yes, then I guess you have exploited the variation over time in the data. Then if such variation exists, perhaps you can also think of using pair fixed effects to, in a way, address partly the endogeneity of the FTA variable. Of course, permitting that there is variation in the data. And on your use of fixed effects, I guess you use country fixed effects. But since you also have time dimension, you might as well try to use importer year fixed effects also. Of course, when you do that, the GDP variable will be absorbed into it. But if your main focus is FTA, then that's fine, because that's your coefficient of interest. And then on, zero flows, I guess there are no zero flows in this because it's aggregate data. Or if there are zero flows, if you want to look at further disaggregated data, then you might as well use PPML, which will address other standard methodological issues also. Now, you find that PTA promotes, in a way, food trade, right? So what is driving this? For example, is it a particular set of countries, like, for example, Nepal and India, through the bilateral treaty, they accord to each other duty-free access to primary agricultural products. At times, it could be that certain pairs are driving the results. And on policy recommendations, you can maybe better link it tightly to the results. For example, you mentioned as a recommendation, increase in food availability and food access. How does it relate to the result exactly? And you talk about development of infrastructure. The gravity estimation does not inform the issue of infrastructure. Maybe you could play with some variables and include it in the gravity model. You also have a suggestion of fully utilizing these agreements. So that's why initially I asked, you can present some data on the rates of utilization itself first. And then also in the recommendation, you say something like the number of FTA, higher the number of FTA, greater trade. But I guess we have used an FTA dummy itself. So it's basically the presence of FTA that increases trade rather than number of FTA. And you might also want to think about using all countries, perhaps a huge set of countries, because that would lead to efficiency, and include a PTA dummy or a FTA dummy using the Baer and Bergström data set, and then a BIMSTEC dummy, and interact the two. That would give a larger set of countries, more efficient, and then that would also be consistent with a general equivalent framework in a gravity model, since you are using multilateral resistance. So that's the first set of comments. And on this other paper, the paper by Ms. Dr. Swati Jain, such some like methodological questions like, are lags used in independent variables, and what sorts of instruments are used, and is your interpretation in terms of causal relationships? I'm not insisting that they should be causal, even correlations are informative. And perhaps one can also better explain why FDI has that negative impact on agricultural growth, as you found. Now, I guess I have about 3 minutes or so, I guess, at most. So to come to Professor Yagna Reddy's presentation, now, so his focus is basically on littoral states in the region, but there are also two landlocked countries. And let me bring some perspective of landlocked countries, because some would argue that there's a tenuous link between let's say Bhutan and Nepal in the Bay of Bengal. Of course, they depend on Kolkata port or potentially on Mongla or Chitgaon port. So one could argue that they are part of Bay of Bengal. So for BIMSTEC to deliver something, if BIMSTEC can deliver something on connectivity dimension, then that would be worthwhile for landlocked countries to expend, negotiating and related capital on this venture. So BIMSTEC connectivity should be more than what already exists in the form of bilateral agreements with, say, India or Bangladesh, or the ongoing BBIN initiative. And on this thing, more studies are required with regard to feasibility of transport and transit through corridors connecting India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, and onwards, because there's a lot of study on the South Asian context, but not in the BIMSTEC context. And that's one point. And you also mentioned trade trust deficit that is inhibiting cooperation. So wasn't like BIMSTEC supposed to put trust deficit behind, which dogged, SAARC. Now, if you are referring to the relationship between India and smaller neighbors, then yes, there is still a deficit. But then there is also more to it, because now you have South Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries in BIMSTEC. And then central to the idea of connectivity via BIMSTEC and the putative benefits it generates to landlocked countries in South Asia like Nepal and Bhutan is Myanmar, you see, from the connectivity aspect. And a mature, response to the internal affairs and developments in Myanmar that's rooted in reality and that shows deference to how ASEAN deals with Myanmar is of utmost importance. That's one geopolitical aspect. And finally, you said that yes, BIMSTEC can attract a lot of external interest. Yes, that external interest is likely to be in proportion to the extent it shuns, cooperation with China. Whereas most BIMSTEC members have a lot of trade and investment ties with China, which brings us to the question raised repeatedly in these conferences, including in the morning by none other than Professor Rehman Shobhan from Bangladesh. So the existing and likely future economic relationships and realities have to inform the designing of initiatives and activities under BIMSTEC. And that would include discussions on how the existing relationship with China can be leveraged. Now I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Faras. It is very interesting. You look at all these three papers in a way critically. Yes, that is what we need to have basically. And then you suggested, you saw the good things coming out of papers, and then also you came up with very creative suggestions to improve the papers, and some of these papers are in progress, and so that is, I think, excellent presentation by you on these three papers. Now we are running late, but now you raise a number of questions to three speakers or presenters. Maybe each presenter can take 2 minutes and answer the questions raised by Dr. Faras, starting with Dr. Reddy. Dr. Reddy, floor is yours. Dr. Reddy, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Please.
So, floor is yours.
I would like to further draw the attention of the chair and other participants. The most ticklish problem with respect to Bay of Bengal region, that the countries in the region are unable to realize the inherent potentialities. Number one. Number two, again and again, they have been suffering from a sort of trust deficit and suffering from a sort of inhibition, so that they could not overcome the inherent problems. It has a resource potentialities in the sense, unlike the regional organizations elsewhere, this BIMSTEC or Bay of Bengal Forum has semblance, has similarities, so that each of the country has better understanding of the other country, so that if the agriculture typology is to be transferred to Burma, or agricultural methodology somewhere in Sri Lanka can easily be adopted. That is number one. Number two, again and again, that has been talked about, there is similarity in the agriculture produce or some other resource potentialities. But instead of trying to have their industry set up in their own land, the raw materials can be supplied to some other country where industries could be established, and some other country be interested with the marketing, so that it would be a multi-stakeholder initiative, so that all the countries would be involved in the pursuit of regional cooperation. Otherwise, there would be no prospects for the jute industry in Bay of Bengal. There would be no prospects for a variety of agriculture produce in India. And Chairman Sir, for your information, way back in 2009, when the state of Andhra Pradesh in India was suffering from the shortage of dal, it was imported from Myanmar. When onions were in great demand in India, India got imported them from Myanmar. Such of these cooperative or mutually dependable relationship is thought of. The regional cooperation, which we have been talked about time and again at various levels, would be a more rhetoric rather than becoming a reality. Sir, therefore, it is high time for the BIMSTEC countries or the Bay of Bengal Forum to have the intrinsic realities in their mind, to have the commonalities in their mind, to think in terms of the possible complementary features, so that it would develop a sort of symbiotic relationship, rather mutual dependent relationship. Therefore, unlike other organizations which would have come into existence, but Bay of Bengal region has such a resource potentiality of its own, such inherent potentialities without borrowing the model of some other country. What is more important, that all these countries should think in terms of what could be transferred to some other country, what could be imported from other country. Otherwise, the capital investment, foreign direct investment, and the what is called the trade prospects, all these things would become academic discourses. Okay. My submission to this forum is that Bay of Bengal countries should think in terms of harnessing the potentialities of their own, instead of India exporting all its goods to some other countries. India shall as well think of importing the goods. Sir, I would like to provide a small example. People in a rural area are more fascinated to go to the malls or the supermarkets in a nearby town to have their routine provisions and vegetables purchased instead of going to the nearby shandy or the weekly market. In a similar sense, the countries in Bay of Bengal region are more fascinated to have their import partners or to have their export destinations elsewhere. Why can't they think of having their own prospects of relationship, either in the trade or in the transport of technology or capital investment? They can think of each other. They can think of mobilizing their resources. They can think of transferring their technology. That is where the mutual dependent relationship would become fruitful, productive, and the spirit and purpose of regional cooperation would really be served.
Thank you, Reddy, Dr. Reddy. Thank you so much. Very interesting comments and your concluding remarks on that. Now let me invite Dr. Jain to answer some of the questions raised by our discussion and to make your final comments. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm really grateful to Dr. Paras Kharir for giving such insightful ideas. I'm definitely taking care of it, sir. And once I finalize the paper regarding your lags and instrument variables, I will definitely share my paper with you so I can so that I get the benefit of confirming my results as you have seen it extensively. I don't have any reply to it because most of the things which he's mentioning is very right. FDI particularly, I just wanted to add one point here. Whenever we are talking about government expenditure, actually in most of the countries, even if we take Bangladesh and Sri Lanka also, the recent trend shows that government support to agriculture is more in form of subsidies, or the private investment which is coming is more in terms of grabbing the resources or acquiring the resources, not in terms of actual investment in irrigation or the structural requirements for the agricultural sector. That maybe that is the reason, that is why, and the amount is very insufficient. Like even for India, only 0.1% FDI comes to the agriculture, 0.01% FDI comes to the agricultural sector in comparison to the total FDI. So I will definitely take care of the point, sir. Thank you, Dr. Paras, again. And thank you for the whole CENIM organization for giving me the chance. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Jain, for your answers. Of course, you are very positive about the comments made by Dr. Paras. And yes, it's always papers are like that. We, being an academic myself also in the past, that we always improve, right? So that's fine. I think that's very good. Okay, my last speaker is Miss Varma, please. 2 minutes.
I would like to first thank you, sir, and then Mr. Paris, Dr. Paris, sorry. Due to some network issues, I was not in the meeting when Mr. Paris has commented on my papers, but I'm really thankful for that. And my other co-author has actually made notes of your remarks. We will definitely work on these papers, these remarks, and get back to you with our paper so that you can further guide us through this, because as we are just students, we are not familiar with most like once you have mentioned Beer and Bergson.
Ms. Sharma? It looks like there is a technical problem from Ms. Varma's side. I think, I think we need to proceed. I'm sure the way she opened up is that she was responding in positive way, and then I'm sure she will improve her paper also, taking into account various comments made by Dr. Paras, and very interesting paper, that paper too. Now, well, what is happening? We started, I started saying that in fact, our Asia Pacific region has many regional cooperation initiatives starting from 1950s. Maybe this is second to only Europe, where EU started. So we have many regional cooperation mechanism. But what we see from the paper presentation and discussion is that still we are not able to benefit. The countries and the people are not able to benefit from that. Now, especially this, what we are facing now is in fact unprecedented crisis, which is a double or twin crisis, which is health problem as well as economic crisis, which maybe which cannot be compared, perhaps except with the Great Depression. But this unprecedented crisis need unprecedented solutions. I still believe that regional cooperation can play a major role. Although we had all these regional cooperation mechanism, from various discussion I heard from the morning, is that nothing much came. I mean, the regional cooperation mechanism were not active in facing this quick, sudden kind of crisis. So I think it gives us a wake-up call for us to get ready, basically. So it is like a tsunami came and nobody was ready. And then we started thinking about various mechanisms, but I don't know now whether we have forgotten about it. So that is the human nature maybe. But one thing, it is clear that we, from the discussion, is that we need to not only strengthen the cooperation mechanisms that we have, but also we need to rethink new way of doing things, new way of coping up with this kind of crisis, which has never happened before. So maybe I urge you. I know there are many experts joining this conference, and I urge all of you to think about new ways of dealing with this new crisis, innovative ways of dealing with this crisis. Always, my observation is that all good ideas came from this kind of intellectual debates, intellectual discussions. So with that, I want to thank my three presenters as well as discussion for excellent presentations. They have done a wonderful job. Usually we used to say, okay, give a big hand in the past when we are physically meeting. Now we cannot do it, right? Only 2 or 3 speakers or the mic are open. So we cannot say that, but what I have to say that you have done a wonderful job. Thank you so much. And the microphone is back to Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi Ratnaike. I think you conducted the session, so in a so efficient way. And also, I know that you had just had an eye surgery, but despite that, you attended the session and contributed. Thank you so much. I must thank the three presenters as well as Paras, our very close friend of us, as a discussant. Thank you. And actually, we started at 11 a.m. today, and now it is 9 p.m. now. And it shows that we had the keynote session and several sessions and the paper presentation. So this is a kind of very intense discussion throughout the day and for the next couple of days too. Tomorrow we'll have 2 paper presentation sessions in the morning. Then we have one session on the connectivity and again on regional cooperation, a panel discussion. Then we have one session on the institutional challenges of how to address the post-COVID challenges. And then a final session on tomorrow on the health issues, how to have this, cooperation or learning from each other to combat the crisis. So I think, I'm really benefited from the discussion, the 3 paper presentations and also from the discussion from Dr. Ravi Ratnaike and Paras Kharel. With this, I'd like to say good night to all of you and see you tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you. Bye then.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.